People might think that my contemporary was never the one. It had to be modern at all times. Do you and Mr. Jackson have any rivalries? No, not to me, no. Michael Jackson was more than just the pop king. He was a guy weighed down by secrets, anxieties, and a lost notebook, whose contents would have rocked the music industry as a wowing prince. Who was formerly viewed by the public as his opponent, was thought to have knowledge of a truth that few were willing to accept. Who was really responsible for that terrible outcome? A tale that has never been fully revealed is hinted at by the cautious looks that are exchanged, the hushed conversations in secret places, and the subtle allegories in their music. Two legends standing against a power that the world was blind to, a missing journal, and disregarded warnings. Make sure you like and subscribe before we get into the mystery surrounding Michael's death and the hints Prince left behind, so you don't miss a single dramatic detail or eerily allegorical note in this. What you're about to witness will make you reevaluate all of your preconceived notions about them, power, and the music they battled so valiantly to preserve. It's more than just music. The world was not prepared to hear this reality, and it is a secret. Prince and Michael Jackson were viewed by the world as two diametrically opposed, arrogant monarchs who refused to even exchange glances. On the charts, they were positioned next to one another and compared for each note and spin. The debate about who is number one was enthusiastically stoked by the media. However, there was another story going on behind that velvet curtain, one that was more subdued, somber, and profound than any conflict. According to rumors, Prince and Michael would occasionally sit together in a peaceful location without any stage lights or music. They were only two individuals who were likewise familiar with exhaustion and anxiety. They talked about covenants that bound every melody and every lyric like iron shackles. They talked about a pressure that only they understood. This pressure mainly affected those who were talented and had skin because they had to deal with a system that did not allow them to keep what they had made. Oddly, there was no space for a competitor in that shared empathy. At the time, the music industry was like a gigantic machine that was consuming everything, even the souls of the artists. Michael once confided in a close friend that he felt like he was being watched because of his intensely haunted eyes. That sensation was nothing new to Prince. To let everyone know he was in chains, he once stood squarely in the center of a stage and wrote the word slave on his cheek. Despite their reputation as fierce enemies, these two men had one thing in common: the reality of a game in which they were both involved, a game in which you would lose everything if you weren't careful. The secrets Michael carried with him added to the burden. According to rumors, he kept a notebook to document everything, including names, warnings, and plans he never got around to executing, rather than just telling Uni. According to some, Prince was aware of that journal. One of the few people who had heard Michael describe its contents was him. Although the reality is unknown, the disappearance of the journal shortly after Michael's death only added to the gloom of the whisper tales. Prince stayed silent as though he knew that if he spoke, his life and his music may be in jeopardy. Rather, he used erratic behavior to convey messages. Refusing to use the name that millions knew, he adopted a symbol as his new name. The people viewed it as strange conduct. True freedom, however, never comes cheaply, especially when you are born having to fight twice as hard to get it. As many who had sat next to him in private chats saw it as a signal. As a result, the rivalry that had everyone so enthralled was revealed to be a facade. A script penned by people who realized that their voice would be too strong and loud to be disregarded if they united and shouted the same truth, so that the world would be too preoccupied with observing the distance between them to detect that the two mountains had a common foundation deep down. It was preferable to make them into opposing mountains. While a person is still living, some things are simply murmured, and once they are gone, they become a persistent, eerie stillness. That journal was just such a silence for Michael. According to the story, it wasn't a typical daily narrative or a kind journal with a few lines of sadness. It was where he meticulously documented his most personal ideas, the identities of people he thought were surreptitiously erecting a wall around him, and the plans he hadn't had time to implement to take back control of his music, his reputation, and his own voice. Michael always carried the notebook with him, as if it were his last line of defense. According to someone who worked closely with him, each page had a clear date on it, and there were reminders to himself, dotted with musical ideas. They want the catalog, or you shouldn't trust anyone. Although it may seem straightforward, the catalog had more than just a few tunes for those who were unaware. It contained the ownership rights to several of the Beatles' most well-known songs, and was worth hundreds of millions of dollars. The odd thing is that Michael did not hide the journal's existence entirely. Sometimes he would give a few subtle clues in private chats. Prince is thought to be among the few individuals who heard Michael Barpa. Despite their distance from one another, there was a strange danger of empathy between them. Both had resisted a system that did not want them to have power in their hands and had suffered from being constrained by contracts. Michael might have thought Prince would comprehend for precisely this reason. Then the unimaginable occurred. Michael's death was unexpected and contentious. Chaos characterized the days that followed. News spread quickly. In the midst of the crowd's grief, one particular incident made its way into the pages of obscure newspapers. There was no journal left. Nobody said they had located it. Nobody openly acknowledged that they kept it. It seemed to have never been there. Those who witnessed it firsthand, however, vowed they were not misled. They recalled the cover's color, Michael's meticulous handwriting, and the strained expression in his eyes anytime someone happened to approach too closely. Compared to the melody of a popular song, rumors travel more quickly. They were rumors that the journal ended up in the hands of the people Michael had previously warned about. Others thought it was safely concealed in a surprising location, awaiting the day when the truth would come to light. Prince knew more about some of the stories than anybody else, but he decided to keep quiet because he understood that once they were revealed, these secrets would drag everyone into an unavoidable whirlpool. It was further complicated by the writings Michael had done in his last years. One account claims that he specifically noted his concerns on a scheme to get him to give up ownership of his library. If the idea was successful, he thought, his musical legacy would no longer be the voice of a free artist, but would instead be transformed into a commercial instrument if such works had been published. They would have not only embarrassed a select few, but also had the potential to completely upend a whole power structure. Prince knew the power of those pages, having already broken the constraints of the industry by changing his name and not playing by their rules. He occasionally gave a serious expression in interviews when Michael's name was mentioned, as though the details of their previous private exchanges were still fresh in his memory. It is widely held that Prince was aware of the journal's contents, even in the absence of it, and that awareness was sufficient to make him more watchful than ever. This simply added to the mystery surrounding the story. Was the journal authentic? Did its contents have the capacity to alter the way that the world perceived Michael's last years? And why did the most crucial piece of evidence disappear into thin air among a deluge of well-examined material? Somewhere in an anonymous safe or in the memories of someone who made the decision to die, bringing that secret with them, could be the answer. There is no doubt that the journal's disappearance involved more than just the loss of a few pages. It was the loss of what Michael had worked so hard to keep throughout his life, a piece of the truth, a piece of his voice. And in retrospect, it is impossible to avoid asking, was this precisely what some people had always wanted? The death of an artist, the disappearance of a diary, and a tale that is still rumored behind closed doors. Michael was not the kind of person who readily let his guard down, particularly when he felt that his every action and every word was being watched. He appeared to be living in perpetual alertness in his last years, as if every look and every handshake had a secret meaning. Michael had whispered, "They know everything. They hear everything. We don't have much time," according to a close associate. The "they" he was referring to wasn't a few particular people, but rather an unseen force, a network of power that was hard to identify. Prince, who had fought to regain ownership of his music, was more familiar with that feeling than anyone else. They met in private rooms, places not on any schedule, where there was only soft music and an honest conversation between two artists who had been framed as rivals in the public eye. He knew that fighting this system was not just a legal or contractual battle, but a psychological one where a small mistake could cause everything to fall apart. There, Prince was no longer the purple one, and Michael was no longer the king of pop. Just two men talking about loss, fear, and the intense need to keep their voices to themselves. It is said that during those meetings, Michael occasionally carried a thin briefcase, and at one point, he opened it to show Prince a few photocopied pages from the missing journal, where the words were a list rather than lyrics or melodies. Prince never confirmed this story, but anyone who had seen the look in his eyes when Michael's name was mentioned would recognize a heavy sadness. "This isn't just about me," he reportedly told Michael, referring to a list of names and organizations that he believed were targeting him. "If I fall, you'll be next." It is important to note that these meetings were not frequent, but each time they did occur, Michael would return with an unusual tension. He publicly criticized the music industry for exploiting artists, and once painted the word slave on his cheek as a message of protest, leading many to believe that there was a deep-seated empathy between him and Michael that went far beyond what the media ever described. We are in a race against time. At the time, no one completely grasped Michael's meaning until everything came to pass. According to a member of his entourage, Michael was silent for the whole car ride home, following a chat with Prince that lasted more than 3 hours. If Michael had actually shared some of the journal's contents with Prince, then Prince carried a weight of information that could have rocked the entire industry, which is why his silence in the years that followed is all the more remarkable. These pieces of the puzzle add even more vividness to the theory of in the artist community, especially for the highly successful artists of color at the time. Keeping secrets and protecting oneself was a crucial survival instinct. History has shown too often that when an artist starts to question power and assets, they easily become a target. Was he afraid that speaking out would put him in the same quagmire from which Michael had struggled so hard to escape? The truth is sometimes the most dangerous thing you can have in this game, and both Michael and Prince have been through handcuff contracts and silent battles to keep creative control. As one veteran producer put it, if these two were truly sharing information with each other, then it wasn't just about music. It had to do with power. In an industry where everything can be purchased, silence can occasionally be the only act of self-preservation. In hindsight, the private conversations between Michael and Prince are like unseen bridges that unite two seemingly disparate paths. That statement reverberates as an explanation for everything that transpired later, from the journal's unexplained disappearance to Prince's reserved manner. It is a testament that beneath the glittering lights and prestigious titles, there existed a layer of reality full of pressure and shadows that only those within the circle could truly grasp. And maybe, if the truth is revealed one day, people will realize that those whispers, those meetings no one knew about once, held more significance than any song or award. They weren't dry strategic meetings, but rare moments when two legends, who were always under scrutiny, were allowed to be honest about their fears and hopes. The entire music industry was in shock when Prince made an appearance with a new name, an unpronounceable symbol that was half like a male and female emblem and half like a code. The media at the time saw it as a farce, a publicity stunt, because in their world, sometimes maintaining your own voice was the hardest victory to achieve. Prince did not want his name, which he had used all his life, to become the property of a record label. So changing it was not only an act of defiance, but also his way of regaining control over his own identity. Even though those who knew the backstory knew it was a direct blow to Warner Brothers' power structure. When Prince appeared under the new symbol, many fans thought it was not just a personal declaration, but also a subliminal message to Michael, who had frequently complained about being bound by unfair contracts, with coercive clauses that prevented him from releasing or performing as he wished. Michael was not unfamiliar with this story at all. Prince started incorporating lyrics and stage imagery into his songs during those years, which his devoted followers took to be secret messages. I am finding a way to break free from the enclosure. You must find your own way too. It was said that Michael had noticed these signs and that they had strengthened the silent bond between them. In a few performances, the colors and lighting were arranged in an odd way, as if to reference a trapped friend. A song was added to the set list without any promotion or explanation, but the lyrics sounded as though they were speaking on behalf of someone who was silent. He would understand, Prince said softly to a band member after a performance, according to a guitarist who formerly worked for Prince. The comment had no name and no context, but for people who had heard of Prince and Michael's secret bond, it was an essential component of the jigsaw. Maybe the public thought they were competitors over the years, but in reality, they were communicating with each other through music, a private language that only the two of them knew. What added drama to the story is that Prince never mentioned Michael's missing journal in public, but he always stressed freedom and artistic ownership in every interview. For those who subscribe to this theory, Prince's choice of symbol was not just the artist who was once known as Prince. It was also protective charm, proving that an artist never belongs to anyone but himself. Prince's silence regarding Michael's secrets was not a denial. Rather, it might have been the only way to keep them safe. And that's what led people to believe that Prince knew more than he ever publicly stated. Something that, if all of the hidden messages in Prince's music and performances were cracked, they would reveal the truth about what happened to Michael. Maybe Prince didn't want to share the truth because it would be too risky. The world erupted when Michael Jackson's comeback with "This Is." It was announced, and his image at the press conference in a red jacket, sunglasses, and a half-mysterious smile led people to believe that this was not just a tour, but a declaration that he had returned stronger than ever. However, concealing it in melodies, symbols, and images was a subtle game, one that only those who truly understood the story would realize they were playing the final plan from Michael to escape contractual obligations and regain full control of his musical catalog. However, was also known to those who knew him well. After this tour, many old contracts would expire, giving Michael the chance to resign on entirely new terms in which he would, for the first time, have total control. On nights at the Staples Center, after the orchestra and dancers had left, Michael would remain alone on stage, not singing, not dancing, just looking out at the empty seats as if calculating every move. According to his family, Michael was not only practicing for his performance, but also studying contract law, having private lawyers review every single clause. It was unclear what the atmosphere was like around Michael at the time, but one crew member recalled that he would often say quietly, "We're about to be free." According to some close associates, Michael was already accustomed to pressure, but this time he felt genuinely surrounded. He also received ambiguous warnings, strange late-night phone calls, and saw unfamiliar faces appear in the rehearsal area. Michael expressed similar concerns to Prince in secret chats, reportedly over the phone or in discreet meetings. Prince's only response was, "Be wary of the people you believe to be on your side." Then, within a few days, everything was different. All eyes were on Conrad Murray, as the media reported that the official cause was an overdose of prescription medications given by his personal physician. That, however, was merely the beginning, according to those who believe in the backstory. A few weeks before the previous contracts were set to expire and Michael could regain possession of the whole song repertoire, they claimed that this accident occurred at an unfavorable moment. The timing was too coincidental to be random to those who had been watching for a while. They brought up the lost notebook, the earlier warnings, and the reality that if Michael regained ownership of his songs, many influential parties would lose hundreds of millions of dollars. In addition to being a personal loss, his passing marked a significant change in the entertainment industry's power dynamics. Prince was reportedly deeply affected despite the fact that he never publicly expressed his feelings. According to an old friend, Prince was silent for a long time after hearing the news before stating, "This wasn't supposed to happen." To those who thought he knew more, that statement seemed like an admission that Michael still had an incomplete plan. But to someone who didn't know the background, it might just sound like remorse. This turned into the tour that never happened. However, admirers are nonetheless troubled by what it stood for: the need for autonomy, the command of a heritage, and an unfulfilled promise. It was a time when music history would have been extremely different if everything had gone as planned. There are too many unanswered questions that no one is willing to address in public because of that very emptiness and the abruptness of the conclusion. For the remainder of his life, Prince carried those questions with him. He never stated in public that Michael had been hurt, but he also never refuted the reports of the lost journal or the pressure from influential people. Maybe he realized that some facts, if made public, would not only ruin the reputations of a select few, but also rock the industry as a whole to its core. Consequently, it began to represent a lost chance. Those with the inside scoop will never be able to forget this event, because it ended the last chapter of Michael's lifetime quest for independence. It accomplished more than simply conclude a tour. Conrad Murray's trial ended with a manslaughter verdict, and the news media covered it extensively as though all the mysteries had been resolved. However, that decision fell to many who knew Michael well, like a door being slammed shut to hide the shadowy spaces beyond it. To them, Murray was just the first floor of a multi-story structure where the actual decisions were made by anonymous individuals. Having a scapegoat made it easier for the public to find closure and allowed the system to remain in order. LaToya Jackson, who rarely remained mute while discussing her brother's death, once said bluntly on television that this was the outcome of a premeditated scheme rather than the mistake of a single doctor. Although she did not provide any evidence, LaToya's tone and the expression in her eyes gave the impression that she was concealing something, which only strengthened the speculations about the missing journal. This was no longer a story about a medical accident. If Michael had actually kept a book in which he listed the names of those who wished to control his legacy, and the journal disappeared immediately after his death, according to those close to him. Michael constantly made notes, not in a long-winded diary manner, but in brief, snappy, and direct remarks. During a break, a dancer in the This Is It practice troupe claimed to have seen Michael penning a few brief lines in a small leather-bound notebook before putting it in his jacket pocket. Michael just grinned when asked what he was writing. Later, we'll discuss this. In addition to being musical concepts, they might have been fragments of a bigger vision, which no one currently possesses in its whole. The journal's account was like a tiny smoldering fire that never went out in the months following Michael's death. The same dead end resulted from fans' interpretations of LaToya's statements, their searches for hints in previous interviews, and even their analysis of Michael's song lyrics for hidden meanings. Nobody knew who owned the notepad or where it was. According to other stories, it ended up in the hands of those who were directly interested in Michael's discography. In a rare interview after 2009, Prince was questioned about Michael, and he simply responded, "There are some things you cannot say in front of a crowd because they are not ready to hear." For many, this was a subliminal affirmation that he was aware of the answers to the unanswered issues. However, Prince also realized, as Michael had explained to him, that the truth is not always allowed to come to light when a tale involves multi-billion-dollar power and money. Many contracts and enormous income for the people in the background would be at risk if a legendary musician were to regain the rights to their musical gem. Things proceeded so swiftly following their death, as though they had been planned beforehand. Their entire existence revolved around their music catalog, which suddenly turned into a battleground. Ownership was quickly claimed by corporations, individuals, and even family members. Although hundreds of millions of dollars were spent on copyright purchases, few media outlets covered the fact that Michael and Prince had dedicated their careers to defending these same rights. One particular element raises a lot of questions. Prince had sued Warner Brothers and had regained the publication rights to several of his great records, while Michael had publicly stated his desire to buy back all of his rights from Sony ATV while he was still alive. They were both about to be fully freed when everything abruptly stopped. In a sense, their unwavering quiet made it simpler for those who wished to manage their legacies. According to an old friend, Michaels used to say, "My music is my blood. If I lose it, I have nothing." Prince had a similar scenario. He considered music to be a part of his soul rather than merely a product. As a result, their inability to see their last journey created a huge hole in the question itself, as well as in the hearts of their supporters. How might things have turned out if they had lived longer? Their legacy endures despite the fact that the truth has never been fully revealed. Everywhere, the tunes continue to reverberate. Millions of people still get chills from their performance footage, and their music continues to serve as a constant inspiration for younger generations. However, every melody now has an additional layer of meaning for those who believe in the backstories. A reminder that the shadows beneath the stage lights are still hidden. The public's perception of Michael and Prince may also be permanently etched, as there are no solutions.